Oh, I've got big news for you today. This is going to be huge because the first thing I want to talk about is what's happening with the Federal Reserve members selling their stocks. The second thing I want to discuss is in Canada, they are beginning to talk about increasing interest rates. And the third thing I want to look at is what's happening with consumer debt. It's going off the charts today, and there are some statistics showing that many people have been unable to pay their bills. All of this is unraveling at the same time, and I want to give you the data that you need to know. So stick with me. Let's go. So if you've been watching the channel over the past couple of days, I've been outlining what's happening within the Federal Reserve. Two of the presidents were known to be big buyers and sellers of stocks throughout the last year and profiting off of information that some say is considered inside information. They are claiming that this was all within the rules, but Feds Kaplan and Rosengren to sell all stocks amid ethics concerns. I'm going to unpack this. I want to get into this from every angle, but let's just cover a couple of points. Regional presidents issue similar statements on Thursday. Critics warn reputational damage to the institution is done. I would disagree because you know how the analysts and all of those involved love the Federal Reserve. Now you can kick out Kaplan and Rosengren and you can get rid of Powell and you can get rid of all of them, but the institution itself is the problem. But that's a whole different story. Quote, while my personal saving and investment transactions have complied with the Federal Reserve's ethic rules, I have decided to address even the appearance of any conflict of interest by taking the following steps, essentially saying, we're going to sell it all. That's it. Okay. You can read it further if you want, but that's the basic point here. All right, looking at this, it's just basically saying the same information. This is a Bloomberg article. At a time when they were being roundly criticized, and to the extent to which the policies have made the rich richer, you need to question the optics of what these guys are doing. It doesn't shed a positive light on them. That's one mention of this. Yes, okay. Fine. As I talked about in the previous videos, the Federal Reserve is buying $80 billion of treasuries, $40 billion of mortgage-backed securities. In the case of the mortgage-backed securities, Rosengren was buying up the REITs. So he's kind of directly profiting from what's happening because they're supporting the market. They're supporting the real estate market, and they are able to profit from this as a result. But anybody could have had this information. That's the truth about it. They knew they were bailing out Apple. That was public information. I talked about that last year. The point here is that we have a system that rewards this corrupt behavior. It's rewarding the bailing out of institutions like Apple who don't need it and the failing zombie institutions that there are an unlimited amount of today. Do you see how this works and why? Because interest rates are remaining near or at 0% on a global scale, and they're printing up money left, right, and center, and they're sending it out to all these institutions. And then when you ask, like Congress asked the Federal Reserve over a decade ago now, who got the money? Tell us who got the money. And the response from Ben Bernanke was no. And that's the way this system works. The Federal Reserve doesn't take any answers or questions from the Congress, which is effectively the people. And, that's how it is. They just move on. Move on. Fed Presidents Kaplan and Rosengren to sell individual stock holdings to address ethics concerns. They're all talking about the same information. But Sven Henrich from Northman Trader had this to say. You really can't make this up. So you could see the chart going up, skyrocketing as it is. This is the current bull market through the period, And then he's basically just pointed out, we've been buying stocks all the way up, but are now selling due to ethics concerns. Doesn't that seem interesting to you? That right now at this point, this information gets released to the public. 2 days later, they come out and they are selling. Now, these two, they're just two individuals. They're not the whole deal. They are not the ones that are necessarily controlling everything. But do they know of advanced information? Are they able to profit off of certain things and be warned of others in advance? If there was going to be a taper, do you think they might know about it before and want to wait for a good excuse to sell off? Seems like a logical step. Bank of America maintains bond buying, sees second half rebound. That's the first thing. Macklin voices optimism on the recovery, but acknowledges the risks. Analysts expect the bank to taper asset purchases in October, just like the Federal Reserve. Analysts expect that. We'll see what happens. But this right here was the interesting one. Bank of Canada plans rate hike before reducing bond holdings. You can read the quote directly if you are interested, but essentially saying that our intention here is to increase interest rates when things are better before we start winding down the balance sheet. So look for that. Of course, I will cover that information. You've got to understand that by my count, there are 24 rate increases globally this year alone. The tightening cycle is definitely on. I'll highlight more about that in just a second in the Money GPS Insights. But you've got to see how all of these different pieces interconnect. I'm going to show you some details, of course, as time goes on, but look at what they do. This is an intentional and direct message to people if they pick up on it. So I hope you're paying attention. Central banks today on a global level are actively involved in tightening. They are basically reining it in. They are trying to stop the inflation. We've heard from central banks saying, like Russia and many others, in fact, I believe it was Brazil just recently said that it's time to slow down inflation. And then, of course, isn't it oddly coincidental that these Fed members are selling at the absolute peak of the market? Who knows where the market's going to go from here, but certainly they've made a big profit all along the way. And then on another level, it is extremely dangerous to rely on these markets right now because of the algorithms and their level of control. They decide what is basically moving the markets on a daily basis, and that, to me, is frightening. All right, anytime I can get some information about Jim Cramer, I always love to pull it up because this gives you the mentality of the typical stock trader, and not that we should be taking any advice from him, but it gives you that mentality. The 6 reasons why Jim Cramer is concerned about the stock market in September. Quote, at the end of the day, I think we could deal with any of these issues, but not all at once, at least not without lower stock prices. Number 1, negative pre-announcements, like you saw with PPG, Sherwin-Williams, the paint manufacturers basically saying, hey, we got some problems, inflation and the shortages and so on. Number 2 being the Fed. Many have called on them to act accordingly because inflation is going to pick up. The Federal Reserve, no, it's transitory. That's a concern. Higher rates. The biggest concern, of course, Congress saying, hey, we're not going to get enough stimulus out there. We need more stimulus. Fresh supply of stocks. That to me is just ridiculous because there are so many, there's way too many stocks today, if anything. Every company who could, anything that exists, they just go IPO and it does well. Geopolitical worries, that's always a concern, particularly with China right now at this time. That was 6. And so essentially what we have is a concern on every level, but most importantly, what's happening with the Federal Reserve. I thought this was interesting and I wanted your thoughts on this. Amazon dangles a new perk in a fight for US workers, free bachelor's degrees. What do you think about it? I just don't understand why this would be a perk to the individuals at this company. Obviously, this is a very, very expensive thing. But I want to know your thoughts. I'm not going to put my input in here. Put it in the comment section below. Why do you think they're doing this? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And so on. There's a Wall Street Journal article. Of course, if you're interested in reading it, it's in the description as always. And then we have this, hilarious. I always like to bring a little bit of humor. The governor of Sweden's central bank compared buying and selling of Bitcoins to trading stamps. Quote, private money usually collapses sooner or later, and sure, you can get rich by trading in Bitcoin, but it's comparable to trading in stamps. Now, who knows what will happen? I have no idea personally, but I thought it was interesting coming from the central bank governor. Okay, the top guy of a central bank. I mean, the whole reason why Bitcoin exists, if you've read the original Satoshi Nakamoto white paper, is basically to say screw you to these people. And well, we've come a long way. But anyway, this is just something that time and time again, I read these type of things and I laugh about it. Now, does private money usually collapse? Why? Why do you think that happens, sir? Why? It's because they have the legal tender status. They are the ones who can say, well, this is what you have to use. And of course, it's always the lack of competition which makes things worse. This is what I want to talk about as an individual. When you have less competition, when you have less potential, when you have less productivity, when you have less of everything, you get more debt, it seems. As buy now, pay later surges, a third of US users fall behind on payments. I'll try to zoom in a little bit and get you a better view of that. A third of the US consumers who use the buy now, pay later services have fallen behind on one or more payments, and 72% of those said that their credit score declined. This, of course, always being a survey, we only get a little piece of the information, but come on. This right here tells me that we are in a real world of hurt that's coming up because people are more interested in putting their stimulus checks into their Robinhood accounts instead of fixing the problems that they have underlying it. Why? Because they say, look, if this next stock only goes, it's a 10 bagger, it multiplies by 10, I'm going to do so good I could pay off all my debt instead of just taking care of business. All right. This right here shows us uranium. This is the uranium ETF having the biggest flow week of its life after a 50% move up in less than 3 weeks. I know many of my subscribers have talked about uranium, and while it may not be included in the ESG, there has been a push for clean energy, and so perhaps that's where this is going. I'm not so sure, but you can see the money is obviously flowing there. Then you've got problems with the job situation. Ultimately, this is just one example, but your local Chick-fil-A, I think that's how it's pronounced, may look a little different as of late. There's a particular reason as to why the fast food chain has been dealing with a worker shortage that has affected numerous locations, particularly in Alabama. They're closing the stores. They can't open their stores. They do not have the people to work to keep it open. I mean, that's how serious this shortage of workers is. In fact, if every single person was working today, all those people looking for work, there would still be 2 million jobs open. I mean, we've never seen anything like this before. And so I don't know where it's going to end, but many people, I believe, many people are hoping and praying for some sort of UBI, Universal Basic Income System. What do you think? Let me know. As always, I want to be able to give you some tips. I'm not complete with this document yet, but stay tuned for it. My goal for the channel is to always include, once I write these up, I got to do, maybe 5 or 10 different PDFs, but it's going to be tips. The end of every video is going to end in some really quick tips which I can give you, and I think that will be beneficial to you, to everybody, the viewer. So stay tuned for that. I know you guys have been really appreciating the tweaks that I'm making, trying to make it a little bit more beneficial to everybody watching. All right, if you are ready, you've got to join the Insiders, because the Insiders is where I'm going to be able to give you those PDFs. Okay, so definitely check it out here at this card or at themoneygps.com. If you want to support me, it's pretty easy. All you got to do is hit that thumbs up button, comment on the channel. These things support the algorithm. And for all the haters out there, oh, I love when you give me those thumbs down. Thank you very much. And your hateful comments, of course, add to the engagement. So that's awesome. If you made it to the end of the video too, you're a true hater or a true lover. Either way, I really do appreciate you, appreciate your time. That's it. If you haven't seen this video yet, then you definitely want to check it out. Click it and I'll see you there.